The town of Silver Creek roared with excitement, treating the hanging like a form of entertainment. But very few among them knew that this woman was the heart of the Apache tribe. If they hanged her, the next day, the entire tribe would come demanding blood in return. Welcome to Wild West storytelling. Let's get started. That afternoon, the town square of Silver Creek was thick with a scorching, blistering heat. Under the harsh, glaring sunlight, a crude wooden scaffold stood tall amid the crowd. Hanging from the crossbeam was an Apache woman, her body limp, the rope tightened around her neck, turning her sun-weathered face a deep shade of purple. Her eyes were wide open, filled with a mix of burning hatred and helpless despair. The townspeople packed tightly around the square. Some were cheering, others hurled bottles, treating the scene like it was some kind of lawful execution. A few stayed silent, but their eyes were cold, indifferent, as if the life of a native woman meant no more than that of a mangy dog. On the wooden steps, a tall deputy sheriff shouted, "This is the wife of the Apache chief. Take a good look, and know what awaits anyone from that tribe who dares lay a finger on Silver Creek." The crowd erupted like a thunderstorm. But in the middle of that chaos, another pair of eyes watched quietly, the steel-gray eyes of Jonas McGraw, a cattleman who lived alone on the edge of town. He rode in on horseback, stopping just outside the saloon, his hand tightening around the grip of his revolver without even thinking. Jonas could feel something was wrong. The woman tied up did not look like someone caught in a skirmish. The rope, the way she was bound, the bruises on her arms, they all bore the marks of professionals. Not the kind of violence that came from a mob. Through the choking red dust, Jonas could hear his heartbeat pounding in his chest. He knew this scene was not just an execution, it was a spark, and once the fire caught, both Silver Creek and the Apache tribe would be swept up in a river of blood. Thank you for giving me the chance to be with you tonight. Let us know where you are tuning in from. Wherever you are listening, I wish you peace and happiness. Jonas McGraw pulled hard on the reins, and his black horse reared up, letting out a piercing whinny in the dusty red square. The sunlight hit his weathered face, carving every deep, stone-like wrinkle. He was no longer a young man, but those cold gray eyes held more sorrow than one lifetime should ever have to bear. Jonas was once a drifter, a cowboy who had roamed through places where death was as cheap as a hand of poker. Folks said he used to be a hired gun, and that he once joined a hunt deep into the San Pedro Mountains, chasing Apache warriors. But ever since the day he saw his wife and young son fall in a bloody ambush, Jonas had walked away from guns and killing. He disappeared to the outskirts of Silver Creek, living off cattle and cheap whiskey. To the townspeople, he was just a strange man, quiet, quick to anger, and friendly with no one. But now, as he looked at the Apache woman hanging from the scaffold, something fierce burned in those eyes. He knew her, that was Ayana, the wife of Chief Red Hawk. She was deeply respected by her people, known as the Heart of the Valley. If Ayana died at the hands of this town, the Apache would not forgive, and they would not forget. Jonas clenched his jaw, memories hitting him like a knife to the gut. He had seen what war looked like between the Apache and the white settlers' homes reduced to ash, bodies left scattered across the plains. He knew all too well, blood would be paid for with blood. And once violence broke loose, nothing could stop it. While the crowd screamed and jeered, Jonas noticed a small group standing apart in the back. They were not dressed like farmers, and they were not local lawmen either. Dark leather coats, wide-brimmed hats pulled low, eyes sharp and watchful. On their saddles, Jonas caught a glimpse of wooden crates marked faintly with the words, "Sharp and Company, Arms Supply." That was all he needed to see. This was not justice. This was a setup. A hidden hand was moving the pieces, pushing both the Apache and the people of Silver Creek toward slaughter. And for reasons he could not yet understand, these men were the ones behind it. A harsh, rattling cough rose from the gallows. Ayana was still alive, still gasping for air in the grip of despair. Jonas clenched his jaw tight, his hand dropping to the grip of a dust-covered Colt revolver. His heart pounded like a warning bell. Either he stood still and let war consume them all, or he stepped forward and cut the rope holding life and death in its balance. Jonas drew a deep breath, locking eyes with the terrified woman hanging above the crowd. And in that moment, the cowboy who had once sworn to live outside the world, to stop caring about anything or anyone, was pulled straight back into the storm by the hand of fate. The sound of drums pounded through the air, beating faster and faster, as if urging the moment of execution forward. The hangman placed his thick hands on the lever, ready to kick the wooden platform from beneath Ayana's feet the moment the deputy sheriff gave the nod. The crowd held its breath. In just a few more seconds, the rope would tighten, and the name, the wife of the Apache chief, would become nothing more than a whisper in the wind. Jonas gripped the handle of his revolver. Sweat trickled from under the brim of his wide-brimmed hat, running down the side of his sunburned face. He could hear his own heart pounding each beat heavy, like a hammer driving nails into a coffin. And then the memory hit him that night. His home went up in flames, his wife and son falling to the ground in the screams of bloodthirsty men. Back then, he had stood frozen, helpless. This time, he would not stand still. "Enough!" Jonas roared. His voice thundered across the square, silencing the crowd. Everyone turned in shock to see the mad cattleman stepping out into the center of it all. The deputy sheriff narrowed his eyes. "What do you want, McGraw? This is town law. Walk away unless you want to hang with her." Jonas did not answer. He pulled a knife from his belt. In a flash, he leapt onto the scaffold. The blade gleamed in the sunlight. One swift motion, the rope snapped. Ayana fell, collapsing into Jonas's arms. She coughed violently, gasping for air like someone pulled back from the edge of death. The square exploded into chaos. Someone drew a gun. Someone else threw a stone. Cries of "Traitor!" echoed through the crowd. Jonas helped Ayana to her feet, shielding her behind him. "She is not a criminal," he shouted, eyes blazing. "This is someone else's dirty game." The crowd hesitated. But then, gunshots rang out from the back from the men in black hats. A bullet slammed into a wooden post, sending splinters flying. Panic swept through the square. Jonas realized it instantly. It was the arms dealers who had fired. They wanted to turn this chaos into real bloodshed. If word reached the Apache that the chief's wife had been killed in town, war would break out before the sun set. He clenched his jaw, lifted Ayana over his shoulder, and charged toward the horse tied outside the saloon. Bullets zipped through the air, some smacked into the dirt, others tore across the rooftop. Ayana murmured weakly in his ear, voice trembling and broken. They are not from the town. They want to start a war." Jonas swung up into the saddle and lashed the reins. The horse let out a fierce cry and bolted from the square, galloping through a storm of gunfire. Behind them, there were shouts, alarms ringing, and the sharp scent of fresh blood in the air. He knew, from the moment he cut that rope, his life had changed forever. And now, he carried not just one life on his shoulders, but the only chance left to stop a war that would burn Silver Creek to the ground. Jonas urged his horse through the sparse pines, the wind whipping against his face, red dust swirling in their wake. On his shoulder, Ayana still breathed, but it was a raspy, labored sound. Her body grew heavier, as if it was beginning to let go. With every pounding hoofbeat, Jonas could feel it, not his own heartbeat, but the steady drum of fate tightening its grip. As the setting sun cast a deep red glow over the distant hills, Jonas veered into a narrow canyon rarely traveled. There, in a shallow cave once used for cattle shelter, he gently set Ayana down and used his knife to cut the last of the rope binding her wrists. Deep bruises ringed her skin, some broken and bleeding. Jonas clenched his jaw, his calloused hands trembling not from fear, but from fury. Ayana opened her eyes. Her voice was rough, but clear. "No, not townsfolk. Others. They want the two sides to kill each other." Jonas nodded slowly. He had seen the signs back in the square. The rope was military grade, double-braided, the kind only found in supply units. There were unfamiliar boot prints in the sand, not the work boots of miners or farmers. And most telling of all, the crates marked "sharp" on the saddles of those strangers. "Gunrunners," Jonas muttered, his voice like gravel sliding down stone. "They want war, so they can profit from selling weapons." Ayana stirred, her weak hand reaching for his arm. "If Red Hawk hears I died in that town, there will be war. Not just Silver Creek. The whole valley will burn." Jonas sat beside her, his gaze heavy with memories. He had seen the Apache strike back before. He had seen white soldiers gun down women and children as if they were game. Once hatred caught fire, there would be no place left for reason. "Then we have to show them the truth," Jonas said. "You are alive, and they need to see who's really behind this." Ayana looked deep into his eyes. There was still strength in her, the kind that came from standing beside a great chief. "You will help me?" Jonas said nothing. He had sworn never to take sides again, to live a quiet life on the edge of the world. But now, As her eyes locked onto his, filled with both trust and desperation, Jonas knew there was no turning back. Outside the cave, the wind howled through the cliffs, carrying an echo like a warning. Jonas gripped his Winchester rifle tighter, his eyes dark and steady. This fight was no longer about his own life. It was the line between fragile peace and a war that could bury the land in blood. And from that moment on, the solitary cattleman became the only witness who could stop the unseen hand pulling both peoples toward the edge. Thank you for being here with me. If this story stirred old memories of dusty afternoons and the sound of hoofbeats echoing in your heart, I invite you to subscribe to my channel, so each day we can sit together again, and I'll tell you another tale from the Old West. Bad news travels faster than the wind. Before darkness could fully settle over Silver Creek, word had already raced across the mountain ranges and down into the valley. The wife of Chief Red Hawk was hanged in town. By the next morning, Apache war flags had risen. Columns of smoke rose high into the sky like pillars of vengeance. Back in Silver Creek, church bells rang out in warning. Townfolk poured into the streets, building barricades, digging trenches, stacking sandbags along Main Street. The deputy sheriff barked, "The tribe is coming. Ready your weapons. Silver Creek will not bow to a bunch of redskins." A chorus of, "Yeah," followed his cry. But behind many of those voices lay quiet fear. They had no idea they were being moved like pawns in a bloody game. New crates of weapons marked with sharp had already been delivered, stacked in the center of the square, as if someone had been planning this all along. In the canyon, Jonas looked to the horizon where dark smoke from Apache campfires painted the sky. Ayanna was standing again, her face still marked by rope burns, but her eyes were bright with fire. "If they believe I am dead," she said, "by tomorrow, blood will spill. Even the children may not be spared." Jonas tightened the strap of his rifle across his shoulder. "Then we have to get you to the tribe. They need to see you alive. That's the only way." But just then, a rifle cracked through the canyon. A bullet struck the rock right where Jonas had been standing moments before. He pulled Ayanna down at once, eyes flashing with alert. From the cliffs above, shadowy figures emerged, men in dark leather coats, rifles gleaming in the sun. The one in front, with a narrow, sharp face, smiled coldly. "Smart, McGraw, but too late. The Apache will descend on the town before you ever get her back, and we'll sell guns to both sides. Gold will flow like blood." Jonas ground his teeth. There was no doubt now the whole thing was a setup. The gun runners were the invisible hand pulling the strings on both sides. More shots rang out. Stone shards flew. Jonas crouched low and dragged Ayanna deeper into the canyon. He returned fire, each shot ringing loud in the dry mountain air. 2 men fell, but the rest pressed on, determined to silence the one man who knew too much. Amid the smoke, Jonas turned to Ayanna, voice tight. "If I die here, you have to keep going. Make sure your people know the truth." Ayanna looked back at him, her eyes filled with emotion but steely with resolve. "No, Jonas. You saved me from the gallows. Now we will both get out of this together. We will not die to feed these vultures." In the distance, the sound of Apache war horses echoed, drawing closer by the second. The showdown was coming, and the line between peace and destruction now hung by a thread. The sound of Apache horses echoed like thunder through the canyon walls. Jonas and Ayanna barely had time to slip into a narrow crevice between the rocks. From the hillside above, warriors emerged, their faces painted with red streaks, eyes burning with fury. When they saw Ayanna, they froze as if seeing a ghost shock flashing in their eyes, quickly replaced by rage. They had believed she had been killed by white men. The leader shouted, "This is a trick. The townspeople killed her. Blood must be paid with blood." Jonas stepped out, gun still in hand but raised high above his head. His voice rang out, gravelly but strong. "Listen to me. She is alive because I cut the noose myself. And the ones who hanged her, they were not from Silver Creek. They were arms dealers who want war between us." The warriors growled. A few spears were leveled at Jonas, but Ayanna stepped forward. Her eyes blazed, her voice clear despite the rawness in her throat. "Listen. I saw them with my own eyes, men in leather coats, carrying strange rifles. They captured me near the eastern ridge, handed me over to the town, and then vanished into the dark. They lit the match so that my people and the town would tear each other apart. Then they would sell weapons in exchange for gold. That is their plan." Silence fell. The wind whispered across the mountaintops. In that moment, every eye turned to Ayanna, the woman they called the soul of the tribe. She did not flinch. She did not step back. She stood tall, letting the bruises around her neck speak for themselves. A young warrior slammed his spear into the dirt and cried out, "If that is true, then we need proof." Jonas reached into his saddlebag. He pulled out a cracked piece of wood, scorched but still marked. Sharp, arms supply. It was from the crate he had taken during the skirmish. He tossed it into the center of the circle. An elder warrior stepped forward, picked it up, and squinted at the brand. He nodded slowly. "I have heard this name. Vultures from the east who sell death. Now it is clear." Murmurs rose among the warriors. Their anger no longer pointed toward the town, but at the ones hiding in the shadows, the gun runners. Jonas lowered his weapon and stepped back beside Ayanna. He knew this moment was fragile. Hatred still simmered, blood still hung in the air. But at least the truth now stood before the tribe. Ayanna placed her thin but steady hand on Jonas's shoulder. "You have saved not just me, but both our peoples from a war." Jonas let out a slow breath. His gray eyes flickered with exhaustion. He knew the storm was not over. Sharp and company would not let go of their prize so easily. And the real fight was only beginning. Night fell over the valley, and silver moonlight spilled across the jagged ridgelines. The Apache camp glowed with the flames of a dozen fires. In the circle of warriors, Ayanna sat at the center, her frame frail, but her eyes blazing with fire. Jonas stood just behind her, gripping his Winchester tightly, eyes sweeping the shadows beyond. A scout rode in hard, breath short and urgent. Sharp. They're camped at the valley's edge. Over 30 gunmen, wagons full of ammunition. They still think she's dead. They plan to push both sides into war by morning. The camp went silent, the air thick with tension. A young warrior shouted, "Then we attack now. Blood for blood." But Ayanna raised her hand, her voice low but firm. "Number Apache blood will not be spilled for the greed of others. We will fight, but only the ones who set this fire upon us." All eyes turned to Jonas. He gave a slow nod, gray eyes flashing like steel. "Tonight we show them for what they are to the tribe, to the town. No more lies." At midnight, a group of riders slipped from the camp, hugging the cliffside in silence. Jonas led them, Winchester slung across his back, moonlight reflecting off his worn but resolute face. Ayanna rode beside him, her Apache cloak billowing like the wings of a night bird. Below, the camp of Sharp flickered with scattered lantern light. Crates of rifles stacked high. Their hired gunmen laughed loudly around the fire, unaware they were now the hunted. Jonas raised his hand. A volley of Apache arrows sliced through the night, striking canvas tents. Flames erupted. Screams of panic echoed through the canyon. Gunfire exploded in reply, fire and smoke drowning the valley in chaos. Jonas charged in, rifle blazing each shot, finding its mark among the blood merchants. Ayanna stood her ground, bow drawn. One arrow flew and struck down a man aiming for Jonas. The thunder of Apache horses roared as warriors surged in like a flood of flame. The battle raged, brutal and swift. Sharp, who had planned to profit from blood, now found themselves cornered by it. The survivors fled in panic, abandoning crates of burning ammunition. Amid the smoke, Jonas saw him, the sharp-faced leader of Sharp. The man raised his gun at Ayanna, madness burning in his eyes. Jonas shouted, lunging forward. The bullet grazed his cheek, but his Winchester fired first. The gunrunner collapsed, blood soaking into the dust. The battle ended with the rise of dawn. The valley was painted in gray smoke. Crates crackled in the fire, and the last of the flames curled into the morning air. The Apaches stood around Jonas and Ayanna. No cheers, no celebration, just silence. They watched the sunrise, understanding that for once the river of blood had been stopped before it could overflow. Jonas lowered his rifle, chest heaving, eyes searching for Ayanna. She gave a slow nod, her voice soft like a prayer. "You did not just save me, you saved the tribe and the town." Jonas said nothing. He simply looked toward the rising sun, and for the first time in many years, he felt he had done what was right. The morning sun cast its warm golden light across the valley, still laced with the lingering scent of gunpowder. The fires that had consumed the crates of rifles were dying out, leaving behind blackened frames and trails of ash scattered over the earth. The Apache and the people of Silver Creek, once ready to tear each other apart, now stood in silence, all eyes fixed on a single place, where Jonas and Ayanna stood side by side. The bruises were still fresh around her neck, but Ayanna's eyes burned bright, untouched by fear or defeat. She stepped forward, her voice rising clear above the scorched earth. "You have seen it for yourselves. It was not the town that sought my death. It was not the tribe that betrayed anyone. It was these merchants of blood who staged this war, hoping we would destroy each other so they could trade death for gold. A murmur spread through the crowd. Angry faces, tightened grips on weapons. But this time, the rage was not turned toward each other. It was aimed at the truth that had just been uncovered. Jonas stood beside her, his gray eyes heavy with thought. He was no hero, just a man carrying old wounds. A man who once tried to disappear from the world. But last night, as the rifle burned hot in his hands, he knew he had stepped out of the shadows. He had not saved Ayanna for glory or redemption. He had done it because he could not let injustice take another innocent life. The Apache bowed their heads to Ayanna and then turned to Jonas, eyes filled with both caution and respect. The people of Silver Creek did the same. Those who had once called him the crazy cowboy now said nothing, because they knew without Jonas their town would have drowned in blood. As the morning light grew stronger, Ayanna placed her hand on Jonas's shoulder and said softly, "You saved me, but more than that, you saved both our peoples from the trap of hatred, and that is something no badge and no judge could have ever done." Jonas only nodded, his gaze turning toward the distant mountains. The wind kicked up red dust, carrying with it a strange warmth. He knew his life would remain a solitary one, a man with a horse and a bottle, always moving. But today, he had found a simple truth. Sometimes, just one man taking a stand can change the fate of an entire land. Ayanna returned to her people in celebration. Silver Creek took down its barricades, and outside, the sun burned bright, a promise that peace, however fragile, still had a chance to grow. Jonas mounted his horse and turned away from the town. His silhouette was lone, but proud, and in that moment, he thought he heard a whisper riding on the wind. One hand reaching out is sometimes enough to stop a storm of blood. He smiled faintly, his fingers brushing the silver-plated rifle that had been with him for years. And then the horse galloped toward the horizon, leaving behind the morning light, and a story the West would never forget. In the West, it is easy for men to shed blood over hatred, but the truth is, sometimes, all it takes is one soul brave enough to stand up and an entire war can be stopped. Sometimes, saving one life is saving a whole land. It has been a true honor to be with you tonight. If this story touched your heart, I would love to hear from you. Let me know what you thought down in the comments. Type the number 1 if you enjoyed this story. And do not forget to subscribe channel for more thrilling tales from the Wild West.